Okay, so we're going to unwrap the shield, but first we're going to add some details. Let's go ahead and pull up the image from my folder. And like I put it into the scenes folder, so I can just have that up. If I'm using this as reference, I'm going to have it up. I'm going to go ahead and mimic the actual count of rivets that I have using this array tool, and you guys can follow and use it the same way. There's a couple key things to keep aware of when you're using the array tool. So I got 8 and 10 rivets total. First, you got to add a couple things and get it set up. First things first, the rivet's going to be based off the actual pivot point. It's going to rotate around the pivot point of this object. So I'm going to have them rotate around this ring here and add a couple more. And so there's several ways to go about that. So if I add a sphere now, we'll go ahead and do sphere. Just going to throw it over here to the side. This is a rivet. It does not need to be 32 segments, not at all. I'm going to do 16. I still think that's kind of high, but since I'm only using half of it, I'm going to change that to a hemisphere, and I can do a chop or a squash to get the most out of it. I'm just looking at poly count to make sure. I don't think I need that many polygons. I could probably do 8. I think I did 12 actually. Let's do 12. It's a good round number for the shape. I'm not going to weld this to the shield. It's going to float right on top. There's too many vertices to make it airtight. It's a waste of time and energy for the level we're at, so I'm not going to worry about it. In the modern way of doing things, what we'd use is a normal map to actually do this. So we'd actually paint them on in ZBrush and then project that image on top of this low poly shield to make it look like it's higher poly. And we'll get into that later this semester. But right now, what I want to do, if I rotate currently, it's going to rotate off the center of my object because that's where my pivot is. But if I want my pivot to align, I can go to pivots, effect pivot only, and slide this over to this general spot. And I can rotate it, and that's kind of more of what I want to do, is rotate around the center of the shield because that's where I'm going to weld it. Does that make sense? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead back into, I'm going to undo everything and reset the pivot to the center. And I'm going to place my object where I want it first. Let's go ahead and put it right there on the radial. All right, so I'm going to place it right there. Probably make it a little smaller. Probably scale it in the Z, just make it a little flatter. All right, so what I want to do now is I'm going to align my pivot of the object to the shield. So I'm going to go to Align. I'm going to hit Effect Pivot Only, and you get this 3D cursor, which allows me to move the pivot around. So what I'm going to do now is use the Align tool, which looks like basically Mater from Cars laying down. I'm going to click on, because I already have one object selected, so I'm going to click on the object I want to align it to. I get this pop-up. This pop-up is going to give me a choice between X, Y, and Z. I can uncheck or check everything. I definitely want it on the X. I can put it on the Z. That's going to basically give me the height of it, and then the Y. So I'm going to go do all three, and I'm going to do off the actual center of the actual mass of the object. Because since my shield is round, the center is going to be the center of mass, which is the dead center, which is where I want it. Make sense? I hit OK, and now my pivot point's there. Turn off that function, and now I can go to rotate, and I can definitely hold Shift and then create it. Hold on, cancel there, and create it this way, and then say I want to do I don't know. I said 9, so we'll do 7 instances. Okay, well, I got to undo that. All right, so we can already see I'm already wasting time. So I'm going to go to Tools, to the Array tool, A-R-R-A-Y. An array in programming is just a list, right? That's all it is. We're building a list of things. It's a similar set of objects. This is where we're using instances, so we can make an instance, which means that if I make several copies of one object and make it an instance, if I affect one, it affects all of them together. It makes it easier to manipulate multiple objects of the similar types. So first things first, when you have the array window open, you still have access to your screen so you can move around, unlike the actual Align tool. And you got to turn Preview on if you want to see what's going on. So now that I have 10 counts of this object, and they're all instances, and they're sitting right on top of each other. So if I go to the rotate, and I rotate on the Z axis, I can move them around.
Nice.
Now I can be accurate. And I can also move them up in the Z. And I can move them into I can rotate them into Y, X, and I can change the scale. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is how I do 90% of my fine art. This tool right here, this thing, the array tool. You could do so many cool things with it. Just go have fun with it. But just be mindful of what you're doing.
If you had made that
Oopsie.
airtight and welded it, you wouldn't have been able to use the array tool on it, right?
Would not be able to use the array tool at all. So, since I said I have 8, so I'm just go ahead and change the count to 8. And I rotate in the Y. There we go. Oh, not the Y. Sorry, the Z. Silly me. And then basically, if it's 8 and I'm trying to divide it, it's an 8-sided or 16-sided shield, so it's skipping 1 every time, which makes it a 45 degrees. I can do math. It did the math. I get to spout the mouth numbers. But there's that. I can hit OK. Now, the neat thing about it being an instance, first things first, this is what I want you to be aware of. Sphere, it's bold. Shield, it's not. Y'all see that? The sphere is bold. So if I go ahead and put a mesh editing and then I go to edit poly tool, see how it's bold? And I click on the shield, see how it's regular font? Bold means it's being shared, or it is an instance, or it's being shared. And this is what comes up with the problem that John's having. What happens a lot when you guys are learning this software is that you're ready to attach things. Like, I want to weld this to this, and you select these two, and then you put an edit poly on top of it. Now the edit poly is not in regular, and it's not bold. It's italicized. But I had 2 objects here, so I'm going to go ahead and see if I can attach it. I can't attach it. Why not? Because they're 2 separate objects sharing the same modifier. Does that make sense? Can't do that. It's going to create a dependency loop. So trash can, now let's go back. I'm going to undo that real quick. Now if I go here, it's like just that one right there. See how it's got it italicized and is bold? That means it's shared across all its instances. See how that's italicized and italicized? So that's where we have a problem. So be wary of that. The thing that's key to remember is that I got to select an object that I want to be the base. This is the base object, my shield. It's going to hold all the objects. And then I go and attach what I want to attach it to. But I don't want to attach those spheres yet because I still want to kind of play around with it. Because what if I want to just add a little detail and make it a little bit more dangerous?
Yeah.
Spikes. And I'm only moving 1. And I'm getting all the details off of that. So let's double click on this edge loop here. I get the whole thing selected. I can tighten that up a little bit. Now let's say I want to kind of make this rounder. So I'll double click on that. So this is, okay, the reason why I like quads. The software wants us to use it, so I can double click and quickly select lines that are contiguous. Does that make sense? So I can quickly move. And now I'm going to go to what's called chamfer. Chamfer just splits the thing into 2. Just make it a little rounder. I just hit checkbox. And now my shield is deadly dangerous. All right? So now I can go here and say, if I like it, I'm going to go ahead and hit save as, because I've made some progress, Shield 03, and then I'm going to go through and attach, I'm using the list, I'm going to attach all these pieces, attach, and there's my shield, deadly dangerous. Very low poly, deadly dangerous, but still. So now that I've made this step, I'm going to save as and check and hit, now I'm at version 4 of my scene. Yeah, it seems redundant, but you know what? I don't care. Like I said, these things are very, very small. All right? I got a lot of the files that we do in here will barely be over a few megs. Barely. Easy peasy. So, and this also has all my backups. So Shield 3 is where I still have the spheres separated and I can do things to them. If my art director goes, that's stupid, take those pointy things off. I didn't ask for that. I'm like, oh, sorry. I can go fix it. All right, so now that's set up. Well, the next stage is we're going to unwrap it all. So a couple key things. I could have unwrapped those spheres, couldn't I? One at a time. So let's go back a step. That's why I love having backups. I'm not going to save it now. So I got here. So what I'm going to do now, instead of unwrapping all these objects, which I can totally do, and this is totally legal. There's nothing wrong with this at all. 3, select everything, flatten mapping. I can do that. Oy. That's gross. So I'm going to take that and do that and grab this one, and I'm going to go to the unwrap, and I'm going to unwrap this dude, and that's the sphere. It's unwrapped. This is because it's a primitive, and this is half of the sphere, so it's pretty much already flattened. If I go here and do this, I kind of get an idea what's going on. I believe these are the actual. This is the spiky bits. Let's turn this off. These are the spiky bits that allow us to actually kind of get the pointy stuff, and I want to kind of weld all these together. But for right now, what I can do, I'm going to shrink this down and slide it over, and I'm going to collapse to, now it's all one edit poly, and these all have the same exact UV unwrapped scenario. They're all the exact spot. Does that make sense? Now I'll go in here, and now I go and attach all my toys. So I have a big, awesome, dangerous toy. I go into my UV editor, unwrap. So there's my sphere, there's my shield. So let's go ahead and select this dude. There we go. Flatten that out. All right. Now remember, these are all my pointy bits. All right. And then if they're going to have the exact same texture on there, I can leave them just like that. If not, I want to kind of go through it and change some things. There's definitely a better way to unwrap this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the tools that I have available to me. So I know that that's the top one, so I'm going to select that. I know that's on the top one, and meaning it's not the bottom piece, right? And I can grab that one, and that one. The key I want you guys to pick up on is that I'm using the UV editor window and the 3D window together to make my selections. I'm doing one selection to find it in here, then I'm using select by element to select the entire contiguously welded object. Did you get all that? And then clean up, add to my selection here, and this will allow me to grab all the pieces relating to the objects that I want. Then go here, and I'm going to do a planar projection, which is just basically the first one we saw. I missed a couple pieces, but that's all right. I can go in there, and now I can grab these. This is mostly the bottom. I can select that, turn that off, and I can pack. Let's see, I'm going to group this because I'll do a better job than that. Let's see, not that. I'm in one button. Group it, and then I can go here and just pack this whole thing. And that's a better looking shield. Look how small our rivet is, right? If we want to put more details, we'll scale that up a little bit. It's a cheap, but it's fair. But that's a good look at what we can do to paint our object. That's our general concept of what we're going to do today.